Ladies and gentlemen, the Tiny DevOps Guy.
Welcome to episode number 1 of the Tiny DevOps Podcast. I'm Jonathan Hall, your host, and today I have my good friend Patric Conant, who is going to be talking to us about infrastructure. Patric, why don't you start by introducing yourself a little bit? Tell us what you do professionally, what you do for fun maybe,
Sure.
And why do you know anything about infrastructure?
Sure. All right. I'm Patric Conant. I'm an independent contractor. Most of my work comes from one of the largest IT providers in the world. My day-to-day varies between, standing up and making look professional, a very expensive and large delivery for the company I work for, to holding the customer's hand sometimes weeks or months into their operation, showing them how to get the best value out of we're the Converged Solutions group. So we pack up a lot of storage, compute being virtualization in most instances, but occasionally application and fabric into a single package that usually is essentially co-located in my customer's environment. These are large organizations that have their own IT staff and management, and our package is kind of all together, and they don't manage it the way they manage the rest of their infrastructure. It's done to our standards and practices, and most upgrades are a professional services engagement. So it's very like my role is very infrastructure-y, and the teams I work with in these companies are, from their architects to their engineers to their operations. And I see lots of misses in these silos.
Maybe you can give me an example of a miss that you've seen.
So big organizations probably have in the last 2 years a much more bigger and pronounced cybersecurity organization than they did before. Cybersecurity was probably distributed among operations, engineering, architecture, and now there's a separate group doing it, maybe 2 separate groups, red team and blue team sort of organization. And like this can just cause chaos, as opposed to like you imagine cybersecurity being implemented. Okay, we have somebody who goes through and does our internal audits. We often have policies and procedures that are just not like we can't test them until it's in production, and who can change which passwords, and whether we make a new account or share a password for these bottom level infrastructure roles, the bare metal questions, becomes a very tough challenge that really requires a lot of collaboration and an organization-wide at least set of goals and plan.
Let's get that really concrete. So when you're talking about low-level infrastructure stuff, you're talking about like the passwords to a router or something like that.
So yeah, so my product is bare metal switches that are not managed in the organization's switch infrastructure.
Okay.
Like we're a separate set of switches. We're an engineered solution, so our upgrades happen lockstep with our our hypervisors, our application servers, our storage, and our switches.
Okay.
So, but IPMI is really is probably the
And define that for those who don't know, IPMI.
elephant in the room. Baseboard management.
Yeah.
So a standard from the 90s when we thought we knew how we would want to manage things, that really hasn't stepped forward much. There are places in the spec that say that you must allow logins with no password in your implementation. Even if your organization can say, we don't do that. But the IPMI spec from the 90s says that your implementation has to let it happen.
All right.
So
to
go ahead.
step back a little bit here and get a big picture of what we're talking about. So you see that these companies that you work with have started doing these DevOps transformations or whatever, and they kind of just have these details have just gotten lost. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Well, the expectation in the DevOps transformation was, that the lowest level would be abstracted away, and this is tough technical work with the biggest implications. Like obviously somebody who compromises bare metal has done as much as they can do. The only thing that stands between them and their and everything in your universe is encryption.
Yeah.
And very often, like, we have the bare metal do the decryption. Like they may not have the keys, but they can just ask the function to do the work. The pipe dream, the ideal, the hope for level of we're going to automate as much as we can, and I think the flip side of that, like the boogeyman under the covers, is we won't have to worry about that dirty bare metal, slow to implement, hard to troubleshoot. Is it a software or hardware problem? All these things at kind of the bottom of all our stacks, they're going to go away. Like, we're going to push code as infrastructure, and the code isn't going to be dependent on hardware. And fundamentally, it's not. Like, it can move to new hardware, but that doesn't mean that we don't have low-level practices that we really got to it's got to be organized with the same care and emphasis that our highest level abstracts do.
So I think I see a blind spot frequently in DevOps circles that might be a similar thing that's what you're talking about, but a different application. And that is that we like to focus on the things that are easy to automate, and things that are not easy to automate. We kind of just we won't deal with that. And, a simple, obvious example that everybody thinks of is UI testing. UI testing, it's automatable these days to a degree, but it's messy and it's confusing. So we just kind of write the unit tests and leave the UI tests alone. We're like, it'll take care of itself. It sounds like maybe you're saying we have the same problem when it comes to this low-level infrastructure.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's I think that's the downside to every wave of innovation that comes through. Like the problems that it solves get solved, and we're like, yay! But on the flip side, all the things that that it couldn't address are still here. And everybody in technology, likes to think that we're not still solving, the problems from assembly and COBOL. But, some days we literally are.
Yeah, so once again, let me paint this picture. So we have a team that is bought that they drank the DevOps Kool-Aid, and then they threw the infrastructure baby out with the bathwater, and their server, their disk arrays and their switches are rotting with insecure passwords and who knows what other kind of crap. Have you seen a company that didn't do this, that has done it properly? Have you seen an example where this has been done well?
So, unfortunately, like nobody calls me for the success stories.
Okay.
I just I'm sure
if you're listening and you've done this right, please call. We want to hear about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. unfortunately, like I just have the, you know, I have the malaria outbreak viewpoint of the world. Like when I come into work, we have something to fix.
That's true.
So
People don't call me when things are working well either. It's
right,
usually more organizational problems, but it's the same thing.
right.
So what can we do?
But
Is it hopeless, or do we have tools we can use to address this problem?
I think it's a human being problem. It's a social problem. Like we just have to remember that there are humans on the other side of all these things. Like we get very excited about automation, and the great thing about automation is you can abuse it and it doesn't complain. But somebody racked and stacked all your equipment. Somebody laid out the bottom of your network plan. You may have a just completely agile fabric where you can push a button and the whole network can move across equipment, data centers, cloud providers. But somewhere somebody is doing that work, and if we don't forget them, maybe we can pick up the phone and ask them. And don't get me wrong, if you're in Amazon, you're not gonna call and talk to the guy who racks and stacks your equipment. But all those considerations, all that low level minutia, power consumption, weight, like somebody very technical and savvy needs to be working on these problems, and it can't just it can't just have the outsourcing hand wave applied to it and then be like, this is terrible that none of our stuff works. Like those guys are awful. Well, I mean, the devil is in the details.
So let's say I come to you. I'm say a middle manager at a 50-person company, and we're migrating. We're doing a DevOps transformation. We're planning it for the next year. And I ask you, Patric, what can I do to make sure that in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, this isn't biting me in the butt? Do I need to hire you to come into my company and help me out, or what can I do?
Like it's just a matter of knowing whose responsibility it is, as far as I know. Like when we have good people working on tough problems, we get kind of the best results we can hope for. Yeah, like knowing who that person is.
So assign ownership to the server rack and to the switches, and
right.
Make sure somebody has the job and a list somewhere of do these things.
Exactly, because they're not impossible tasks. They're just unpleasant. Like you have to go tell the DevOps team, like we're going to use half our equipment while we work on the other half, and somebody says, well, like that can never happen. We're in an interesting space now. Like never doesn't seem like the right roadmap.
So it also sounds like there's some parallels here to another topic that gets a lot of attention. And that's just technical debt as it applies to code. And this idea that you write code and it's not done until it's deleted. It sounds like you're saying the same thing, that your server rack isn't done until it's unplugged and thrown in the dumpster, and you need to maintain it. You can't just plug it in and walk away.
Right. Again, just like a good sysadmin, a good infrastructure person, even a good network person in the days of software defined networking, where we think of it as more of a configuration than a body. Like those people are worth their weight when it's impacting your organization. It's very funny how like if you walk in on a happy production Wednesday and say, these 6 things really need to happen in your organization, they're like, eyes raised, and like the last time we tried that, it was bad. If I walk in the middle of an outage and I say I need to fix these 6 things, like somebody will be walking up to me with whatever I need to get them so that we can move on. And we just need like you know, and it's the same 6 things. I'm not.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, before the conversation today, we talked briefly about this, and you you just expressed the concern that DevOps kind of ignores this whole area of infrastructure, and I think you're right. I mean, that's not to say that there's not any teams that do it. I'm sure there are some that do a good job.
Right.
But I mean, when I think about DevOps, I'm not thinking about firmwares on my switches or their passwords and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, that obviously needs to happen. Now, of course, there are teams that more or less outsource all that. They're using Azure or AWS or something, and they literally don't manage that. But there are many teams that do. And there's many teams that have a hybrid approach of some sort, and you just need to pay attention to these things, right?
Right. So does that fundamentally work? Can you basically have a contract with a cloud provider that lets them do everything except, your Python code?
Well, I mean, to an extent.
Okay.
And of course, there are drawbacks. I mean,
certainly,
vendor lock-in would be an obvious one.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're building, of course, right? I mean, I definitely work with people, with companies that have completely outsourced that stuff, and they're just making API calls to Twilio or to S3 or whatever it is, and the app, as far as it's concerned, is essentially a Docker container, and that could literally move anywhere. So in that sense, yes, there are some companies that do that, but I think there are many other. I mean, just a few years ago, I was working for a manufacturing company here in the Netherlands that we did use AWS, but we also had our own infrastructure in the building. So it was a combination of those two. And if either one of those went down, we would be in trouble.
Right.
So yeah, I see that all the time.
So were they fundamentally redundant? Did you have more capacity in either location than you needed to run your operation?
Not per se.
Okay.
Yeah, it was that they were doing different things. So our ERP system was in-house, and our web front end was on AWS, that sort of thing. So there were different functions in different places. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of the hybrid cloud implementations I run into are like, this is the first time we've ever considered that we might have redundancy at a application level, and this is amazing. And I was like, and it's, I don't think the cloud is what solves your problem. I think that the fact that you never thought about application level redundancy was was what you missed. And elasticity in the cloud, really huge for feast or famine business models.
Well, yeah, it's helpful for certain, like you said, business models. It's great for startups where the cost is so low that you might as well pay 15 times the price for somebody's small sliver of a server somewhere else than a fifth or a smaller portion of a whole server in your rack, right?
Right. Right.
And then, yeah, like you said, the ability to scale up or down elastically is beneficial for certain business models. Yeah.
So the next place that I really intersect with DevOps. So we've known each other a long time. I have a deep experience in system administration. The ops side of DevOps, and I've been to and I've had 4 or 5 DevOps interviews, and they all went like train wrecks. Like, fundamentally, I was talking to a developer, and we just were not talking the same language. We worked together before, and fundamentally, in like what you were looking for was a DevOps role. We were supporting a service broadly, and I always imagine, like, because it gets talked about fairly often, I always imagine like I would be a shoo-in for some of these lower level DevOps roles, and then I could spend some time, learning whatever the programming language, and kind of practices were. No, like we walk in, or a technical interview ensues, and we don't find any common ground. What the person interviewing me thinks is fundamental, like I'm slow or rusty on. What I think is, the things that I could give quick, core, meaningful answers on, like they don't consider part of their day-to-day concerns.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have more of an infrastructure role, so that's understandable, but it's also frustrating to me because, some of these roles, I consider to be well below my, pay grade or skill set, even though I, I've probably written less than 1,000 lines of shell that ended up in a file somewhere and not on a command line.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's I think you're touching on a really valid point. When I see DevOps or site reliability engineering roles, they're usually looking for either developers who know some amount of infrastructure, or infrastructure people who want to become developers, or something. That they're really looking for a hybrid skill set there, and so I guess there's two sides to that coin. On the one hand, it makes sense in a way that we want infrastructure people who can interact as developers with the developers and understand their needs and their concerns, because they're supposed to be serving the developers.
Sure.
And B, can maybe implement automation. But the flip side of that is that maybe, the whole topic of our conversation here is we're kind of throwing out half of the ecosystem with that.
Right.
We're discarding the people like you who have excellent operational and infrastructure skills, but maybe don't have the dev skills, or they're not as sharp. And as a result, we're not hiring people who have your skills. It's not just that we're not hiring you, it's that we don't have your skills on our team now.
Right. In an interview, it came up how much production code do you think you have out there? And I was like, very little, but there might be some really large organizations still depending on some one-liners that I've written. That's now load bearing. That's what grabs something from one side and puts it where the other side can have it, and it wasn't until the first time somebody called me 5 years later about something I composed in 35 minutes with about 200 iterations at a command line. I was like, I have no earthly idea what this says. What was it we were trying to do? And these are, and generally it's, some bash and a lot of basic Unix utilities, grep, awk, sed.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I think we're in agreement on this. I was looking for a fight today. I don't think it's happening.
Well, we can, but I think we largely agree on the process. That's how we came to work together.
Yeah.
You were like, I could spend more of my time developing if I hired a sysadmin instead of another developer.
Right.
And then
for the listeners who are wondering, Patrick and I did work together briefly. What was it, 8 years ago? I don't remember. It's been a while.
It's a long time ago. Yeah.
But we did work together for a while at a previous company in a different lifetime.
Yeah. And I'd never heard the term site reliability engineer when we started that, but that was very much how I pictured my role at the time, even though I didn't have a name to put to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Back to the human problem. I often get asked what I know about Docker, Kubernetes, containers. So if you tell somebody it's a process with its own IP stack, and that's fundamentally what it is and how it's managed, they're not impressed. But as a sysadmin, that's what it is to me. Like that's how I figure out where the logs are and how to dissect the problems with it. And a good container, there's not much to look at.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't start great conversations.
Yeah. It's a completely different set of assumptions going into that question, right?
Right.
Whether you look at it from the application side or from the system side,
Right.
very different view of the same thing.
Yeah. What's your background in containers? Well, the first time I truded into a system that I couldn't get to start was probably, 20 years ago. Well, that, to the person I'm talking to, that has nothing to do with, the Docker infrastructure. And I'm like, when we work on something broken, we're working on some pretty small pieces, and we don't work on stuff that doesn't break.
Yeah.
Like that, yay, it works on my laptop and I can push it into production exactly like that. That's a super cool feature. But as long as it works, like you don't need somebody to come fix it.
Right.
Tell me about your thoughts on cattle versus pets.
My thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, for one thing, cattle are very smart animals, and we should treat them like pets too. We shouldn't just shoot a sick cow. Have you ever met a rancher who would shoot a cow who was sick? So it's a bad analogy.
Well, he'd certainly isolate the cow real fast.
But that's not. Yeah, but that's
right.
different, right? That's the same.
Right.
If you have 6 cats and one's sick, it has worms. You're gonna put that one in a different room too. So
right.
That's actually treating it like a pet. But that aside,
right.
What I like about the so-called cattle analogy is I like the idea of stateless services because it forces a sense of simplicity to your application. And I say a sense because it's actually harder to think about, but when you accomplish it, it's a certain sense of simplicity.
So when we say stateless services, we mean that the state of the service shouldn't change the outside world.
Essentially, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
like at any time, anything.
The application. I mean,
right.
I saw a tweet recently that the only stateless service only returns true or something like that. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah.
So not in that sense, obviously, but yeah, it doesn't depend on global state. It doesn't depend on a database and things like that.
Right. So when I think of stateless, I think of UDP NFS, and that's usually not what people are talking about when they say stateless. And I'm,
stateless in the sense
there
of
are
a HTTP request.
There you go. Which is all encapsulated. Like,
yeah. I mean, there can be state on either end, but the HTTP protocol has no concept of that.
Right. Yeah. If you can reboot a box and come back and ask for your session and cause undefined behavior because
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you have any resources for listeners who are interested in exploring this topic further? Whether it be books, speakers, authors,
sure.
People who want to improve their infrastructure. Maybe they're concerned about the router in the corner without a password.
Insecure.org, the Nmap book. Let's have everybody know what the body of an audit looks like. You don't have to be good at it, but I feel like the biggest battle in cybersecurity is people implementing things have never thought about an attacker's point of view or an auditor's point of view. You can learn how to do an Nmap scan in an afternoon, and to take a look at your own infrastructure from that point of view. It's just it's just a way of looking at things that somebody else has to do. So you should probably be familiar with it when they come and ask you questions about it. To speak more to the kind of sysadmin developer rift, I think everybody should probably learn awk. The book on awk from the AWNK authors is probably 100 pages, still available on Amazon. And I think there's some great benefits in learning or in that, sort of line by line thinking, incredibly small. I challenge you to write an awk script that can take up 6 megabytes of memory. Insecure.org and the book on Nmap. Spend a couple afternoons learning your way around Nmap.
That's great. Well, we'll have all those resources in the show notes for anybody who's interested in following up.
Thanks.
And I have 2 more questions, actually. The first is it time to go from DevOps to DevSecOps to DevSecOps infra or something else?
If there aren't conversations in your organization like that, then like I hope you're outsourcing to a great cloud provider or something. I think hardware's dirty and hard and slow. Oh my God, you can spin up a Docker cluster in an hour from what's Docker to I'm doing something. You can spend 5 hours getting the 6 machines you decide to put in your lab to post. There needs to at least be kind of a round table meeting of those groups. But yes, I think honestly the most successful DevOps implementations are really the Infra Dev Sec Ops. Like we didn't leave out any important pieces.
Great.
So yeah, I think that's a great term, and when people start using it, I'll credit you.
All right. All right. Well, my last question, unless you have anything else you want to add, how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in following your tweets or social media or anything? How can we get a hold of you?
Let's see. How about at Mirage Computing on Twitter? And I expect to have a YouTube space and maybe a Twitch stream in the next 6 months. I'm still kicking around. When I do, I hope to come back and talk about it.
Great. That sounds exciting. Yeah. So we'll watch your Twitter feed for announcements for a YouTube channel and a Twitch stream.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, we'll just click that heart button on all your tweets.
Thanks.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Patric, for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. I hope that it's been beneficial to those of you listening.
Thanks.
Thank you.